Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today we'll take a look at this De Havilland Vampire by Swissmilsim. For 23 UK pounds we can fly this classic British post-war fighter jet in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Originally built for P3D, this model has been adapted for the MSFS platform, so let's see how the aircraft measures up. I'm Junior, and please enjoy the ride. First we'll take a look at the exterior before firing the aircraft up and taking it out for a quick evaluation flight. Straight off we can see this is a low poly aircraft, where curvatures can be seen made of lines, not rounded as they should be. Also, we can see that the texturing is of pretty low resolution, but at least there is a degree of dynamic shine, right across the fuselage. For 23 pounds, don't expect anything resembling high fidelity. A pretty basic exterior straight from the P3D hangar, I guess. Okay guys, let's jump into the cockpit and get fired up. According to the pilot's notes, we need to assign a couple of keys to activate an external power source, the ground power unit. We'll go ahead and do that now. Toggle APU and APU starter are the only key assignments we need to make. I have the D and S keys assigned. Now we have the APU keys assigned, let's get the aircraft started. First, press the key you assigned to toggle APU and the external power source will magically appear and be connected. Now press the APU starter key and listen to the truck increase engine noise. Wait for the green light on the APU unit, then we can begin to start the aircraft. First, ignition switches to on, then throw the booster fuel pump to on. Next, open the fuel valves by moving this lever fully forward. Pull the master switch lever down to turn on electrical power and press the start button for about 3 seconds. Now we just need to wait for the dials to register and stabilize before we can get moving. Here's what the pilot's notes tells us about operating this model of the Goblin 35 jet engine. Time limits on power settings. They are clearly indicated on the instrument indicating the number of reactor revolutions. After 3 minutes at red power 750 revolutions per minute, the jet temperature will gradually reach the red limit of 700 degrees Celsius. If this temperature is allowed to exceed this limit, in a relatively short period of time, about 4.5 minutes, the reactor will burn out. Differential braking is used to steer the aircraft. To press slightly the right or left brake to initiate a turn, it's the only way to steer, and takes a lot of practice. The De Havilland Vampire is a British jet fighter, which was developed and manufactured by the De Havilland Aircraft Company. It was the second jet fighter to be operated by the RAF, after the Gloucester Meteor, and the first to be powered by a single jet engine. The Vampire quickly proved to be effective, and was adopted as a replacement of wartime piston engine fighter aircraft. During its early service it accomplished several aviation firsts, and achieved various records, such as being the first jet aircraft to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, we made it to the runway. Now let's prepare the aircraft for takeoff, remembering that sudden movements with the throttle will damage the engine, causing it to overheat and catch fire. So, increasing the throttle gradually and watching the temperature gauge. At full power, release the brakes and begin the takeoff roll. Maximum power for only 3 minutes to avoid engine damage. Try to lift the nose slightly. The aircraft will then smoothly lift off the runway at around 130 knots. After takeoff, we'll climb, staying in the vicinity of the airfield. At around 6,000 to 8,000 feet, we'll begin some maneuvers. The aircraft is quite slow to accelerate and climb, so I guess it's pretty realistic for a vintage jet, like this old-timer from around 70 years ago. Good, smooth aileron response. Nose up slightly for a level roll, but yeah, that's nice. Okay, now let's try to loop the plane. Nose down slightly to pick up speed before we pull back on the stick. So that didn't turn out great. Maybe a little more practice required. At least we didn't crash and burn. So far the aircraft handles pretty well. The aerodynamics are reasonably well modeled and the control surfaces react accordingly. Now let's see how the aircraft handles a stalling situation.
With zero thrust, we'll enter a shallow climb to gradually reduce the airspeed. At 82 knots the aircraft is fully stalled, with a significant wing drop. Use the rudder in an opposite direction to level the wings, and recover to straight and level flight. A height loss of 2,000 feet, but that could be less with some practice, and quicker reactions.
Earlier, I mentioned the importance of slow and gradual changes in thrust, so as to avoid damage to the engine. Now I'll demonstrate what actually happens when a sudden and forceful movement of the thrust lever occurs. The engine catches fire, and will eventually quit on us. Now we have to make a forced landing since the engine is beyond an airborne restart. We're pretty close to the airfield, so we'll simply glide down to the runway. A successful forced landing takes a little practice, but in general terms, select the best glide speed, so that we don't fly too slowly or descend too fast. This aircraft will glide efficiently at 130 knots. It takes a lot of judgment to arrive at the runway and stay in one piece. If we're close to the runway and too high, use the flaps. Don't forget to lower the undercarriage, and of course best of luck. Well, that was a little rough, but at least we didn't crash land. Now we have to leave the aircraft as soon as possible. The Swissmilsim De Havilland DH100 Vampire. As you can see, it's a pretty low resolution model, outside and in the cockpit. It feels nice to fly though, and a good jet for beginners. Also, being low in resolution means good frames per second, and smooth flying for those with low to medium systems. That engine failure is a nice touch, and independently initiated outside of the in-game failures menu. Overall, an enjoyable experience. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button, and subscribe to be notified of the next video coming up. I'm Junior, and thanks for tuning in today. See you again soon.